Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
From Network Nova Live, it's October 25th. Bitches and witches and everybody else, we're going to get it going today. You are on the Friday Power Lunch. I'm Katherine White, your witchy host, bringing you the guests, the issues, the action, and we are fueling the grassroots on our brooms all the way across the nation today because we get things done and we make politics fun, and we hope that you will stay calm and get out the vote with us with Tom Bonier, who is here. So great to see Tom Bonier in the room. Welcome, Tom. Tom, we all know him, and he's a busy guy, not getting a lot of sleep, but he's all the data that we want to learn about. So we're glad he's here. He's the CEO of Terra Group, senior advisor at Target Smart. And then also, we're so excited to welcome Rachel Bitecofer back with Hammy the dog. We saw them dancing in the room. Thank you, Rachel. And if you guys, look, this is the time we want her back in, and we want to just really talk about how we have to keep hitting him where it hurts. If you haven't read her book, Hit Him Where It Hurts, How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game, you better get it. It's not too late. It's a great book. She's a political scientist, election forecaster, political strategist, and just an all-around badass that's really, again, making the rounds again to get people heads in the game where they need to be. So with that said, I'd like to get into some fun with Carrie Shorts here from Coastal Virginia of the Coast of Cova Coalition, Susan Wagner, also of Markers of Democracy, and Fennell Norton, all the way from the Eastern Shore. Boo girl,
another coast.
What's going on?
Yeah, how is everybody? I'm feeling a need to check in. I mean, there are just so many things stressing us out right now. I mean, the polls are coming out, commercials, people stealing signs, and then of course, we know a lot of this stuff's getting manipulated. We're trying to stay positive. But you know what, everybody? We've decided to say, don't get spooked by the trolls or the polls, because they might have some tricks up their sleeves, but we got treats. And what are the treats? The treats are the ways that we are staying calm and GOTV. So I'm interested in hearing from my buddies here on the Power Chat. What are you doing? And I want to start with Susan because this is our national show. What are you doing what kind of treat you have in your bag that's keeping you calm?
Well, first I have to say I'm wearing the best t-shirt ever, voting prevents unwanted presidencies.
Nice.
I'm sure some people
Humor's
have this
good.
one.
I love humor.
One of my favorites. And I want to say that Markers for Democracy, we are a repository and often a connector for so many groups out there that we were getting so much information about opportunities to pivoting from postcarding. And we put together a Google document that just has everything across the country. You send it to us, we post it, and I'm going to put the link in the chat. So anybody who's on who knows that they have to stop writing letters and they need to, or postcards and they need to pivot, please look at this document. It has every opportunity imaginable.
Great. And so wondering from you for now, what treat do you have in your bag that's keeping you positive with all of the stress going on right now?
Well, I have two things, and so I'll be really quick. The one thing that I wanted to offer that was a trick was someone with orange hair not showing up for the debate. But the treat was our fabulous vice president who went there and kicked some butt. So I just think that's fantastic. And we ought to always just rise and hold her up and be very, very supportive about the fantastic things that she does. And myself for this weekend, in fact, today, my little trick will be going to the Walmart, and the treat will be handing out flyers and talking to all the folks who come out about the importance of this election.
Yes, I have to say just what we've transitioned from postcarding to phone banking. And I think talking to voters can be one of our treats because we've had some fantastic conversations. All right, Catherine, want to hear what you're doing to keep yourself calm?
Well, I have my treat bag with all my treats in there. You can see I'm getting ready. See the paydays and the milk duds. So, how much fun is that? So I want to say I had a couple of the tricks I was laughing about because you can't make this shit up, right? I was watching the Turning Point convention with Tucker Carlson talking about spanking teenage girls, Trump dancing the Ave Maria, like goofy, crazy shit, which, the media tends to then want to cover instead of talking about the damage the tariffs will take on, right? The abortion rights situation, because this goofy stuff is goofy and it shows them unhinged. But again, being held to a different standard, the flawless Kamala Harris has to be flawless where this guy could be lawless. So the treat is, with all that distraction and that stuff that you just can't make it up, is I want to remind people that we're winning. In Georgia, everybody paying attention, they had those lawsuits. They wanted to do like those 7 rules about voting that would really mess up and fudge up the election. Guess what, everybody? The Elias Group won those lawsuits, and the Supreme Court of Georgia has blocked them from enacting those 7 really bad things that they wanted to get done there. Another treat I want to give you, who's been paying attention to Virginia? Raise your hand in the room. Today, the federal judge orders Virginia to halt the removal program. Just today, that was heard in Alexandria. You're hearing it first here on the Power Lunch, to stop it from removing people on the rolls and reinstate 1,600 people back on the state voter rolls. So up yours, Glenn Youngkin. You heard it here from me, right? Because I did call his office, and I'm sure they're probably going to put me on the watch list. I wasn't nasty, but I was really calling him out for being such a MAGA monster. So, I'm so glad to report those 2 treats, and I'll put that link in the chat for everybody to read.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Well, I am super excited. Somebody who's keeping us positive. I'm going to flip it over to Fanal now. She's got our first guest.
Oh,
Yay!
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you. I am so excited that I get to talk to Tom Bonier. So we're going to bring him up. And as Catherine told you earlier, he is the CEO of the Terra Group, and he is amazing. And he's probably the busiest person in the country right now. Tom, how are you today?
I'm good. I always want to match the energy on this show, and I don't think I'm ever going to get there, but it still makes me feel better.
Well, I am glad that you're feeling better. So today, what I want to start with, and I know that there's probably so much that you want to tell us, but we have questions from Patreons today, and I want to just start right there with a couple of questions from our Patreons. So I'll start with this one first. In terms of the election, our Patreon, Annabelle, believes that Harris is going to be fine. But what she's worried about is a couple of the Senate seats, and particularly Sherrod Brown and Jon Tester. Is there anything that you can tell us about those 2 races based on all the data that you've collected?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've known from the beginning that this Senate map was going to be among the most challenging, that it looked like several months ago we were only going to be playing defense, and obviously without much margin, especially with Joe Manchin retiring. I think the good news is, for the most part, the Democratic incumbents appear very strong. The polling has shown our incumbents, for the most part, in the lead, and there's a caveat there I'll mention, but Ohio looks good. These races are tightening down the stretch, where Democratic incumbents in a lot of these battleground states had bigger leads. Some of them are tightening. Ohio is one of them, but Senator Sherrod Brown still looks very good. Montana's, obviously by no means a Democratic state, or no one would even call it a purple state, but Jon Tester is someone who they've loved there, has represented the state well. He's a good fit for the state. There haven't been a lot of public polls there. In fact, there was a 2-month period between early August and early October where there wasn't a single public poll released. There were just, a single nonpartisan public poll. There were just Republican polls. There have been a couple polls there that have shown him trailing. We know he can close strong. Something that I saw in the data there a little while ago that was encouraging to me, and I have an update on it actually, but we were looking at these numbers over August and September, and we saw huge increases in voter registration among Native American voters. We know that his Republican opponent there has said He's made racist comments about Native Americans in the state. So to see the big increases in registration, they're a relatively small share of the electorate, but could be, 50 to 60,000 votes. That's not nothing. The whole turnout there will be just over 500,000. And in the early vote, we're now seeing big increases in turnout from Native American voters. So there's a chance we can pull that one out. That would be a huge one.
Yeah, and I while we're on that, I mean, honestly, and I know this is probably scary to say, but we hadn't counted on Texas and we hadn't counted on Florida. And just based on the amount of enthusiasm there, can you give us a little bit of update on those two seats and what they might be looking like?
Yeah, like you say, those weren't on the map. Everyone was saying that Democrats had no chance to pick anything up. And now we've got two states where, this isn't just a head fake, so to speak. Real resources are being invested there. And now we're seeing the vice president and Beyonce there. It's a real effort. There was actually a good poll, I believe it was from Suffolk, that actually showed the Senate race, a 1-point race. It's going to take, people say about Texas all the time. It's not a red state or a blue state. It's a not voting state. If we get the turnout that we can get there, we know we can win. And then Florida, I think a lot of people are more negative on the state than they should be because of 2022. But the reality is in 2022, Democrats stayed home. Democratic turnout just wasn't good there. We're seeing a lot more energy and intensity there. And we remember that we've got the abortion rights initiative on the ballot there in Florida. We've seen what that has done in other states like Michigan 2 years ago. It should have a positive impact and turnout that might not necessarily be picked up in the polls. So if we're looking for potential surprises on election night, those are two states that I'll be looking at pretty early on.
Well, what about Nebraska? Do we just throw that out?
Well, in terms of the Senate, there's the big question there. I don't even want to talk about it.
Okay.
I don't want to jinx it, but that's a wild card, right? With an independent candidate who actually has been leading in some of the polls and, some think might caucus with Democrats. So that's, we'll talk about that one the day after the election.
Okay. I'm good with that. So we do have another question from a Patreon, someone that Miss Susan Wagner. And her question is really this. So she really wants to understand how some of these polls swing. And she was talking about one in particular. Let's see, I've got it right here. And so what we really want to get at is how can 1 week it be 10 points up and then the next week it be 10 points the other direction? And she's talking specifically about CD4 in New York. So if you can get a little specific about that, but just in general, how that happens, it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's actually something we've been seeing a lot more this cycle, which is funny because in general, the poll averages have been quite stable, which is, I laugh at that because we as Democrats and progressives, we are sensitive about these things and there's a lot of anxiety and I understand that. But when you look at the poll averages, it's shown consistently the vice president with a narrow lead across the country and within enough states to get to 270 electoral votes. What we do is we'll get one bad poll and that's the only one we'll talk about when there might be 5 good polls on the same day. And so in terms of that swing, a lot of what we're seeing is independent voters in these polls. These pollsters are having a hard time drawing consistent samples of independent voters. We saw this with the New York Times polls in Arizona over August and September, where they had a similar 10-point swing. And look, we know that younger voters are much more likely to register as unaffiliated voters, but also just as likely to vote for Democratic candidates as they ever have been, if not more so. So when I've looked under the hood of these polls, what I found is the ones that swing away from us, it's usually the pollster just gets a bad sample of independent voters where they make it far too Republican. I encourage people to not, last 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks now, we don't need the polls anymore.
Oh, good. I'm glad
let's assume it's going to be close. Let's go out and just get the votes out.
So I'm not going to ask you what's in your heart of hearts about whether or not it's going to be close. But I'll just say this, in the last elections, we've never had so many people come out to be white dudes for Harris
Mm.
and black women for Harris and this one for Harris. I mean, every kind of group, cat women for Harris, and all of these hundreds of Republicans who are coming out for Harris. Does that show up? Where does
Yeah.
that kind of momentum show up, or is that impossible to see? Is that what we wait for the election to see?
Well, I think we are seeing some of that show up in the data. I think we remember prior to July 21st, we as Democrats locked ourselves in a bit of a doom spiral. It was it was unfortunate just how negative we all allowed ourselves to get. But when President Biden withdrew from the race and endorsed the vice president, we sort of felt that excitement and enthusiasm, as you say, from a lot of different groups, a lot of groups that weren't particularly engaged in the election prior to that point. And that was something that we were just sort of seeing and sensing. And then when we started to look at the voter registration data over that time period, we were seeing, well, it's not just something that we're seeing on social media or within our own bubbles. It was actually showing up in new voter registration, where you were seeing doubling or tripling of the registration rate from a lot of these groups: younger voters, women voters, voters of color, younger women of color, tripling registration rates on a lot of these battlegrounds. And so that's really what moved the polls, when we remember the polls swinging to put Vice President Harris in the lead. And so the early vote, you're beginning to get some of that. We do have to remember with the early vote, that's kind of the deck is being reshuffled a little bit relative to 2020, but you are seeing good intensity numbers.
Okay. And so in the last election, we sort of pivoted to democracy and to abortion, even though we see a lot, we'll see the economy, the economy, everybody says that. But based on whatever data you see right now, is it really the economy, or is it something else that you believe, based on what you see, will drive people in these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, I think these questions have a hard time sort of encapsulating the complexity of the average voter, right? Like, I think while we have issues that certainly are dominating, and we know that since Dobbs, the issue of just abortion rights and basic human rights has been, more powerful political motivator than any issue in decades, if not ever. The polling's going to be somewhat misleading to that context. And so actually New York Times and Nate Cohn, the analyst at New York Times, said this after 2022, that their polling that was suggesting that, look, Democrats had overplayed their hands on talking about abortion rights too much and talking about democracy too much, and that they should have been talking about inflation and the economy and jobs. In reality, we know our candidates were talking about all of these issues. But he said that the polling that suggested that going into the election was a bigger polling miss than the 2016 election in general, the 2016 election polling. So I'm not sure the pollsters have learned that lesson at this point, because we're seeing some of that again. But yeah, my belief is this post-Dobbs environment that we've been in, that has seen Democratic candidates overperform the polls and have the advantage in intensity and enthusiasm, that's only grown since then. And if anything is being underestimated going into this final stretch of the election, it's that effect.
Okay. So one of the things that I'm really interested in knowing about, so we have all the swing state stuff, and we all follow you on Twitter. And if anybody isn't following you on Twitter who's on this call, I'm going to say you are really missing out. So you would probably calm down a whole lot more if you would follow Tom and Simon on Twitter. Here's what I want to know. I want to know what you're not saying on Twitter. What is the thing that you're not saying on Twitter that you can say to us? And we're not going to tell anybody. We're not going to mention it to a soul. So what is the thing?
That's the funny thing, is I think I get people asking me all the time. They say, you're so positive, you're so optimistic, is this just a front? The reality is no. I go to this election data for positivity and optimism. And what I'm sharing is what I think there. So no, there's not. I mean, what I'm not sharing is the stuff outside of politics that y'all would just be bored by.
I don't think so. We're not bored by anything you say. We listen. We pay attention. So this is the other thing that I want to know. So we've sort of gone through a couple of elections when it was all done and over. We sort of had some little clues about things that we coulda, woulda, shoulda. And now we're in a place where it's not woulda, coulda, shoulda. We can actually do them.
Hmm.
So if you were going to say to us, based on all the stuff that I'm seeing, here are a couple of things that I would tell you all to continue to do. With number
Yeah.
one, not watching the polls. So we got
Yeah.
that one. So what is the other thing that you would say would be the most impactful things that we can do these last 10 days?
Yeah, I think someone asked me a question the other day of if I would name a state, like what was the race or state, battleground state that I would suggest is like the one that people should go to. And I thought about that and I thought, look, we're in this unusual moment where you go across the 7 core battleground states that we talked about, and they're all genuinely in play. There's not a state that I look at there and say, we've got it in the bag, don't worry about it. But there's also not one of them that I look at and say, well, we don't have a chance of winning. They're very close. We talked about the expanded battleground of Florida and Texas, talking about the House, governor's races, Senate races. It's unusual to this moment where anyone, anywhere in the country cannot be more than probably get in your car and an hour's drive away from somewhere that is winnable if we put the work in, or doing it from your home, even better. And so what do I suggest people do? Doing that work, we know the most powerful communication in terms of what will modify voting behavior, what will get someone out to vote, or maybe even change their mind about a candidate, is that personal communication. The more personal it seems. That's why I love to see all that y'all do with the postcards and everything else. The more personal it is, the more impactful it is. So continue to work your networks, continue to do your things you're doing. If you're writing the postcards, I hear y'all pivoting to getting on the phones. Having a real human who can speak as a real human to another human is powerful. Use that personal connection and keep working those networks.
So we've got a few minutes, and this is what I want to say. And so I might not be able to go to Pennsylvania, but I've got relatives in Philadelphia, or I have relatives in North Carolina, or friends in North Carolina. And my phone call to my friend in North Carolina to say, hey, your son hasn't gone out to vote yet, would be really, really important, because we know that things can change by 1 or 2 votes if everybody does that. So I think that's an opportunity in terms of not just phone banking, but phone banking to your friends and family and acquaintances. My last question is Virginia. We're worried about Virginia, and we know that we're not a swing state per se, but sometimes we talk about swing states and we forget about the places that we are. Any advice for Virginia in terms of what we ought to be focused on here?
Yeah, well, it's funny because y'all in Virginia have gotten a little bit more attention this cycle than I think maybe flashbacks to a few cycles ago when Virginia was truly a presidential swing state, in that Republicans have been claiming that they could win it. There were some polls that made the state seem very close. And, I thankfully we've emerged from that narrative. But I've been thinking about Virginia a lot lately because we learned something from 2023 in Virginia that I think has been useful and impactful. As y'all remember, in those elections, when Glenn Youngkin invested a lot of money in getting Republicans to vote early, it was the sort of first state that was the proving ground for Republicans, because we know in 2020, Donald Trump told his supporters that voting early, especially voting by mail, was fraudulent. And Republicans realized that was a tactical error. Virginia was the proving grounds for that. And I think what we experienced there has been helpful for me in talking to reporters and others. And frankly, when people look at the early vote and they say, I'm worried about, it seems to be more Republican, I remind them about Virginia, where they were really just taking a lot of election day voters and converting them to early. That's not without strategic importance, but it wasn't indicative of some great wave of Republican enthusiasm. And so that's more retrospective, but I'm appreciative of the work y'all did to be able to lift that up and say, well, look what happened in Virginia. I think beyond that, everything that y'all have done in Virginia remains important. I think we have to remember that nothing is permanent. So continuing the organizing work on the ground, let's not let it be closer. this time around than it was in 2020. Let's expand those margins to make sure that Virginia stays in that blue column and that Republicans aren't contesting it in the future.
Thank you, Tom. So this has been fantastic. We've been talking to Tom Bonier, CEO of the Terra Group, and we're going to talk about Virginia right now. Thank you so much, Tom. We
want to
appreciate
ask
you.
a question real quick. Oh, Tom, I'm going to send you some Reese's or Milk Duds, or what do you like?
Milk Duds. No question.
Duds. You need. I do have one last question. One is we were looking at the vote in Virginia. If you see anything in the women vote or I know we've seen more Black women also when you've talked about that. And lastly, even how your job has changed because the mode of voting maybe has changed, but maybe not, like you said, the outcome. So going forward now, the marker being this year, it's going to be interesting being an analyst, right? People that voted in person now are doing, absentee ballot maybe. So as somebody that analyzes this data now seeing people are choosing different modes, not so much that different intensities, let's just say.
Yeah, it makes our job harder at this moment in analyzing the early vote to understand, because you're getting this crisscross happening where we know more Democrats who voted early last time are actually moving back to election day. And don't get me wrong, there'll still be more Democrats voting early than Republicans. That's a good thing to do, and we encourage people to do it. But you're going to get some, especially younger voters, and then you're having the opposite happen with Republicans. So actually, from a data nerd perspective, it's an exciting data set to see the people who are switching. It tells us a lot about voting behavior. So I'll be sure to, if y'all would be kind enough to have me back on a few months after the election, we'll have some interesting stuff to share.
I'm sure you won't come the next day, but that's okay.
I think we'll all be sleeping.
I hope so.
Yeah. We'll have to also share Halloween pics of our outfits. I know we talked about that in the green room. So be kind of a lot of fun. So thank you. Anybody else? We good? Wrapping it up.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, y'all.
Reading with us, Tom. See you later.
You.
But your Milk Duds are on the way. I'll get a bigger. This is too small for Tom. I need like a big Milk Dud. Like
I think, and I do think like a candy survey and like sort of lining up your candy preferences with your political preferences, maybe your activism style. We could probably do a little. We've got some PhDs on here. Probably figure that one out. That'd be kind of fun.
Crunchy, nutty, tasty, sweet, salty. Yes.
So if we could, so I want to make sure, because we got Rachel coming up after, but I want to be sure to talk about the Do Something Challenge. And to let everyone know that we hit our goal last week. So we have money raised to be able to do our phone bank. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're going to do our phone bank next on Monday. And so I want to talk about that for just a minute. We were talking about pivoting from postcards to the phone bank. And here's what you should know about this phone bank. Our phone banks are fun. They are fun. There are no bad calls. It's just fun calls, because we do the good, the bad, the ugly. And there is nothing more fun than talking about the good call and the bad call and the ugly call, because they are really kind of hilarious. And so we make our phone banks fun. And that's why we wanted to do our own phone bank. So here's the thing. We need you all to show up. We have 161 folks on this call right now, and more will be joining. And you know what we need? We need at no less than 50 people to sign up for our phone bank. The information is all there. So let me just tell you why this is so important. I saw someone in the chat talk about the seats that are available to us in Virginia that we really need to win the House. This is important. There are seats that people don't think we can win, and we can. We can. We absolutely can. So my challenge today is for us not to leave this call without 50 people signing up for the phone bank. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. Don't be scared.
It's not spooky. It's not spooky.
It's not spooky. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. So we've got Stair and Robbin who are going to keep up and let us know who is going into the chat and signing up for the phone bank. What do you guys want to say about that?
And I want to say that Stair said that if whoever signs up on this today on this call that shows up on our phone bank on October 28th, by the way, Monday at 6:00, we have Senator Danica Rome going to kick us off. And if you all have never met our first transgender Danica Rome candidate, everything, she's just a badass and fun. So 6 p.m.
Rock
October,
star.
Rockstar is going to pump us up and kick us off. And then if you show up, you're going to get something in the mail from us, a treat. Yes,
That's right.
I'm not going to tell you what it is. It could be a payday or a milk dud,
Or maybe a Kit Kat for Kamala. I just saw that in the chat. It's awesome.
That would
That's
be awesome.
Kit Kat is my favorite candy.
I promise you, we're gonna circle back to this phone bank because several times during this call today, because I really am invested in this phone banking, especially as we are all trying it out. Some of us for the first time, our postcarders are getting their big pants on and trying something out of their comfort zone, which we also talked about in our challenges previous to that. So come on.
Right.
I really want to go ahead, Susan, because I'm about to turn it over to you anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So two things. One is my mom always used to say, she was a teacher, and she used to say, as soon as I see the grandchild of somebody who I taught, like, I'm going to stop teaching. So the equivalent is that I mailed myself my own postcard. Literally, I wrote a postcard. It was already pre-addressed, so I didn't focus on the address. And my husband said, Susan, you sent yourself a postcard. So that's when you know postcarding probably has come full circle, almost full circle. So Markers for Democracy and various other sites, Postcard to Voters, we do have a few campaigns you can still write for, and feel free to go there. But in terms of pivoting and in terms of baby steps between phone banking or between postcarding, which you do from your own home and you're not really physically interacting with anybody. In between that is vote curing. And the reason I say that is when you do the vote curing, you're actually calling somebody who's already voted. So there is no persuasion. The only challenge you have, which is a really minimal one, is to say, I hate to tell you this, but your vote wasn't counted. And we know that because we get those lists from the Democratic Party on a daily basis. And we know since you voted, you obviously want your vote to be counted. So here's the reason. Oftentimes, many, many, many times, it's just simply you didn't sign it with the right signature that matches up to the signature they have, or you forgot to sign it on the outside. Sometimes it's very, very simple to cure. And all of the phone banks that you could participate in for vote curing, they really hand you, it can't be more spoon-fed. There are FAQs, there are very good trainers. So for those of you who are going to begin to pivot from postcarding letter writing, and for whatever reason want to still stay in your home, vote curing is the perfect thing for you.
Perfect. And let me say, I canvassed with my friend Bill, and he was just having a hard time. And I put him on vote curing, Carrie. I said, like, this is something better for you and more impactful, and this isn't working out. And you know what? He's happy. I made Bill happy.
My mom, so I'm really excited to talk about sort of how we're all pivoting, but my mom drove me for canvassing because she has mobility issues. So my mom drove me, so I just popped out. And then I also have to say that while Cova Coalition has been transitioning out of the postcard world, I was doing some phone banking for National Political Women's Caucus Virginia in Suffolk, and I talked to someone who got one of our postcards. Cool. So that was pretty incredible. But the other thing that Cova Coalition is doing is, and I know that Sharon is on the call for the first time. I'm really excited. She's with the Democrats from Robeson County. It's a rural county in North Carolina, along with Scotland and Hope counties. They are predominantly usually registered Democrats who've had quite a bit of a turnout problem lately. So we have been focused on them. They're trying to make 4,000 calls in that county, in those counties, and we've helped them reach 1,000. Our work party Tuesday night, we were sitting on the floor. We were sitting everywhere. There's women everywhere making these phone calls. So we've been really focused on CD2, but then kind of as it's getting later, many of our members have wanted to do stuff for Kamala in swing states. So that's why we were super motivated to pair with another state because they like to feel like they're helping Kamala. And then we're also kind of focusing on a specific area with CD2, which has really been helpful for us because we feel like, for lack of better terms, we've adopted Western Suffolk, areas that are new to CD2, that are very rural. that also are predominantly Democrat, but they have a turnout issue. We like to call them high potential voters, right? So those are types of things that we are doing. In fact, we're going to be doing something for introverts on Saturday at 10 o'clock. We're meeting in Suffolk and we're having a COVID style car parade to go out and tell everyone about Saturday voting. We've got flyers with the registrar's address and the hours of Saturday voting, and we're handing them out in Suffolk this weekend for out in CD2 with sample ballots. So there is still time, and there are still things that our postcarders can do. So
before you go, let me just say this, because I'm going to go back and pivot to our phone bank.
All right, we got to pivot to
I'm pivoting
here.
I'm going to give me just 30 seconds here. Is that we are trying to make 10,000 phone calls. And these phone calls will make a difference to whether or not we can get these ladies elected, and they can. And so we've got Elizabeth Chur, who actually, when we call people high potential voters, that actually came from Elizabeth Chur in her seminar, You and the 34%. These women that we're calling are Democratic women. They just haven't voted. So it's the easiest phone call you will ever make. And so I'm going to keep on talking about this today because I need 50 people signed up today. If you can't sign up because you're somewhere else, you have a friend or a family member who can. So everybody has something to do to ensure that we get 50 people signed up for this phone bank that will change the House.
Love it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sorry, but the other thing that I wanted to mention real quick is that we phone banked our own members to get their butts out doing something. So cool. We've actually been able to engage 20% of our membership in something in these last 2 weeks from phone banking our own people.
That's like sending yourself a postcard. I love that. And Stair, whenever you guys are ready, shout out. Robbin, what do we got? Do we have
let's see. Monday and the 4th and the 28th are neck and neck. We need 10 more people to reach Vanel's 50. So can we get 10 more people to register?
Okay. Yeah. Well, while we're waiting let's get to the next guest. I'm so excited because Rachel Bitecofer is here. She's a friend of the show. She came to the Women's Summit, but she's awesome. Her background, political scientist, election forecaster, political strategist, and author of Hidden Where It Hurts, How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game. So I saw you dancing with Hammy. It makes me happy. How's Hammy doing in this election? Is he stressed? Is he keeping calm and getting out the vote? Oh, unmute yourself, Rachel. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Hi. Great to see you.
I would be dying right now without Hammy, man. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like he came into he's the one thing, you know?
Yeah.
And he's also like, for women will resonate with women. He's the one thing that gives to me more than it takes from me. Okay. And although we relish the role, most of our relationships are asymmetrical, right? It's the opposite, right? We give far more than we get. And Hammy's the opposite. So anyway, it's really nice to have a furball snuggler to go through the end here with, for sure.
Yes. Were you inspired to keep calm and get out the vote? That was a few weeks ago. And then you ramped up the temperature for everybody, and you were handing out gummies and Xanax the last week or so.
Well, no, I mean, listen, my job is I deal in lead, ladies. Okay. My job is not to tell you what you want to hear and be one of these, hope vendors. All right. Like my job is and the campaigns, like that, that stuff, like my job is to tell you what's going to happen. And it's a 50-50, right? And like, it was always going to be 50-50. It was going to be 50-50 with Joe Biden, but it was 50-50 disadvantage Biden. Now at least it's 50-50 advantage Harris. So while you guys all feel terrible and despondent because you will not stop listening to the polls, even though I keep trying to tell you over and over and over again, all these polls are measuring are not changing the fundamentals of the race. They're measuring change between each survey. Because they're all using different samples and methodology. Some of them are likely voters. Some of them are adult only. You guys, it's killing me, right? So even though but it would be unfair, I think, and not not Bitecofer like to pretend like, oh, it's going to be great.
No,
We're going to win it.
that's why you're
Right?
here. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
the tricks and treats are good. I've just kind of teased because I know we're all feeling it, and we've been telling people this, and we all follow you too. Is really like you said, these polls, the trolls in the polls are really going deep. The ads are really hard, so it is trying to keep in our work and focused on really doing what's going to make a difference. So with that said, I also wanted to say that I saw you also mentioned in the Heather Cox Richardson article that she wrote. I don't know if you even knew that, but she mentioned you from your article, What Happens If Trump Really Wins? Heather Cox went really deep on the whole thing about the 1939 Madison Square Garden. And I don't know if you know that she gave you that shout out about
I
that.
heard something about it, but I was not able to figure out like what it was. So now I know specifically. That's great. I mean, her publication is dwarfs mine in readership. So
Yeah,
that's
well,
wonderful. Yeah.
sharing the same idea, what you see going on. Why don't we just talk a little bit of that? Like so from, your predictions, looking at this race now, and you've been doing this, we've been together like the last 6 or 7 years on this. So from that standpoint of how you used to predict and analyze, talk about that a little bit, and then where we are today and how you're feeling with some of these indicators you're seeing and what we should do.
Yeah, guys, I'm actually gonna come out to DC for election night. I'm gonna do election night coverage with Channel 4 UK. Now, I've been doing mostly, you haven't seen me much in the news here, have you? And that's because I won't do the normalization bullshit. Okay, I
Yeah.
won't act like this is, it's perfectly normal for this this
Right.
haggard freak, criminal freak, serial sexual predator to be running. And, like, I just can't do that. Right. So I've been mostly on the international circuit, and the international circuit is looking, and they see Trump for what he is, because they actually have a citizenry that watches the news and cares about civics. Right.
Right.
And so, like, over there, they're not confused about Donald Trump and what it means for the entire world. Right. But anyway, I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't feel genuinely it's 50-50 advantage Harris. Okay. Because the last thing that I want to be doing is be in public if democracy is collapsing. Okay. And, that you should take that in. And then, here's the other thing with Tom is, like, you would think Tom and I talk every day because we sound like each other. So I wasn't sitting on the camera, but I was listening to Tom, and Tom is saying what I'm saying, and we're not reading each other. That's a good sign, guys. Okay. It's not like, we coordinated those talking points. He said everything that I would say. And in fact, in this registration data, we now finally have the dates closed. And I know Tom was waiting for the data file to update. And as soon as it does, he's going to give me some more insight into registration. But a couple of weeks ago, I said, listen, I wrote a whole post about the Republican Party has gone all in on males. Okay. Like, their theory of the case, because Steve Bannon assured Trump he doesn't need suburban women, is that they would make up for that by motivating low propensity men. Now, so many of you guys are experts, right? Low propensity men, by targeting them with digital stuff about trans people and immigrants, right? And get them so excited that they'd register to vote and show up to vote for Trump. Okay. And here's the thing with that plan is that in order for it to work, there's a preceding event, the registration, the act of registration. Okay. And the first poll of the data did not find a boon of young men under the age of 30 registering to vote. In fact, it found the opposite. Right. It's young women registering to vote in high numbers. So, I think it's really important. I can't possibly talk about it enough. I do a once a week thing, on my blog, and you should subscribe to that, because it's
I'm on
going to
the
keep
cycle.
you far saner than following these polls and 538 and all of that. But like, I keep showing people, look, me and Simon and Tom wanted to build our own aggregator, actually, because of all the red wave flooding the poll stuff. And like in 22, we suspected it was intentional, but now I know it's intentional. I know, at least. I don't know. I want to speak for Tom and Simon, but I know indeed it is a strategy to set a narrative that they are running all these polls and trying to flood the zone. And, Nathan L. Radachik, who's the 538 guy, now that Nate is gone, he runs that model. His argument is, well, yes, but we wait for partisan effects. And I'm like, yes, but at some point, when you have one data set and then 9 partisan polls, no matter how low you weight them, by sheer magnitude, they're going to affect things, right?
Right.
And so I was like, let's build our own aggregator. I'll go collect the data. And so I went to go collect the data, and I was in the data, and I'd been ignoring all the polling data because I wasn't kidding when I told you I'm watching any of the polls. So I hadn't really looked at them. And it's partisan poll, private poll, all of it. And then we couldn't build our own aggregator because there's such a dearth of public polling that it's almost all being provided by ISPOS, YouGov Economist, right, and Morning Consult. Okay. And these 3 are all internet sample polls, but at least they're likely voter, and they have good methodologies and huge sample size. So you can actually get inferences from the crosstabs. And guess what those guys show? Same thing. Harris plus 3 or 4. Okay. I can't possibly say that enough, but I feel like I should charge Nate Silver and Nate Cohen for mental health, right? Because America's election therapist because these guys, right? So that's where you guys should feel very optimistic and excited and ready to go close this out. I mean, if you had to ask me which candidate do you want, Rachel, the one with double-digit unfavorables on both sides of the ticket, or the one with positive favorabilities on both sides of the ticket, knowing what I know about swing voters, which it really is that they haven't paid attention to the election still yet, okay? Right. Even though it's October 25th, you would think they might have started to pay attention. They're going to start right now, next week. They're going to be like, oh, I have to vote. Oh, that's right. Oh, who's running? Oh, it's who's this, Right. They won't even know who Kamala is until that moment, right?
That's right.
And here's the thing.
Go. Sorry, finish up in that.
They like her better.
Yes.
So if you were to ask me, when we get down these undecided pool of people, you have the candidate that people like better, I'd be like, great. Thanks.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's good to be that, but be us. So yes. And some of the things then that we could talk about differently than all this, the polling, the data, and all this, other things that may be moving the numbers. I mean, we do see these big rallies, the Beyoncés, the Bruce Springsteen, the Obamas, making the tour, getting her out there on all these various talk shows. I know Trump is on Joe Rogan today trying to get those boys. We see this, and then we see Lincoln Project getting some good ads. I see a lot of good ads out there. But up here, I'm in Ohio right now, I see some really crazy ads on the transgender care. And some people have said, how do we respond to they're pushing the transgender and the immigration? Should we have gotten ahead of it? Are we ahead of it? How to respond to what they're trying to do there? Do you have any insight on that?
Here's some tough medicine, folks. I mean, we touched on this at the convention or whatever when we met up in Washington. It was for that really fun girl party, and that is, you guys are very progressive people, and outside of that, many people are not comfortable with the trans stuff. It's a wedgeable issue. Now, here's us, right? We pull shit and we're like, oh, abortion's only the 3rd most important issue, so I guess we're not going to talk about that.
Right. That's crazy.
And they're like, hey, you know what? How on the most important issue list where trans shit comes, it's not on the list. I mean, it's number 100, dude. But they're running on it, right? So the answer, Catherine, is not, you can't get ahead of that because we're the ones out of touch. Okay. Frankly, guys, we are out of touch on the mainstream bell curve, right? We're not on guns and climate and abortion and all this other shit. Yes. But when it comes to the immigrant stuff and it comes to the trans stuff, yes, we are. That's cannot win those issues, and that is why they're talking about them. Yes. We should be running our counter offense on abortion, and what we're going to see, my belief is the case, the candidates. I mean, the Harris campaign's doing that, or we wouldn't even have a chance. Okay, right? So they're doing everything right, and that's given us a chance because the backlash to letting 6 million people across the border in 3 years is tremendous, and it may not seem fair, and you might know immigrants add more value and they commit less crimes. Doesn't matter because the average American does not know that and does not think that. Okay, so it's an exploitable issue that is being expertly exploited across the board in their races, right? And, months ago, I tried to tell the Brown campaign, the Tester campaign, this is what's coming to, they're coming after you. And their closing message will be they're letting the brown people come in to murder your family, and they're going to turn your boy into a girl. You guys have heard me say that in this year, right? Yes. And that's exactly what they're doing, right? And so like my goal, my whole life goal is make sure you're running your own counter offense on abortion, because that's the thing they don't want to talk about.
Exactly. Oh, I agree with you totally. Before I let you go, though, we have two questions that came from a Patreon, if you don't mind. And I'll just really quick. The one was about Elon Musk. I mean, when you talk about different people like these billionaires, interference of Elon Musk, how does he get away? Somebody wanted to ask, not if you're an expert on this, I'm not sure, but that PAC he has, and then the petition for people to sign in the money giveaway, breaking that election law, and people are outraged by that. And again, it's another thing that they don't seem to care. But what's your thoughts on Elon Musk and doing all that?
Sure. Here's my thought. I mean, the Republican Party's early vote program seems to have paid off some dividends, especially in Nevada and Arizona, where Charlie Kirk focused Turning Point on. Okay. But on the other back end, this GOTV, traditional field, the shit that we're doing, right? Right. That shit is usually handled by the RNC. And this time they're like, oh, we'll let Elon Musk run a super PAC and take care of it. And here's the thing. If it was going well, he would not have resorted 3 weeks out to offering $1 million a day to get people to sign this damn petition, right? Like, so, it's not a sign of strength, and it is the Achilles heel. The Achilles heel. And we may end up in a situation where Harris, wins, and it's pretty similar to 2020 in terms of the popular vote margin and the electoral college. And the answer will be because of Dobbs' overperformance, right? And the instead of underestimating Trump, they're underestimating that in the polls, which they have done in every poll and every election since 2022, where abortion was on the table, not where Tester ran as a dirt farmer and didn't talk about abortion, right? Like it takes that intervention. So, Elon is not a sign of strength, but I got to tell you, we needed an insane billionaire. We needed Lex Luthor, like a cancer patient needs a heart attack, right? Yeah, God, it's awful, awful, awful. And every one of his his misinformation lies about migrants. I mean, it's going to lead people to violence.
Yeah, and we see that with the Russian interference. We can talk a lot about this if you can stay some time in the after chat, even if we can get you for 10, 15 minutes, because I know there's so much what's happening in Hungary or in Georgia, I think it is, where Russia is interfering in their election again to overturn democracy. I always tell people that are a little bit more, like you said, internationally thinking about this as a NATO issue, as a global issue, that this is really a fight for our lives, for our country, and being this leader that we are. And people, what's happening out there is really kind of crazy. And you see Tucker, these people's ties to Russia. It's just, to me, so crazy. And
we're living in a crazy. We could never sell this plot to Hollywood, dude.
No, I mean,
that's how crazy this shit is. I gave up watching fiction shit because I'm like, man, nothing could be worse than this fiction I'm living in,
I know people will have some great questions for you, and stay with us. And so thank you again for tuning in. I know that you've been busy, and we'll just wrap up and then get on the other side. So thank you, Rachel Bitecofer. Just an awesome, get her book, Hit 'em Where It Hurts. And if you want to know how to hit 'em where it hurts, ask Rachel. So Carrie, want to pop in here, and I want to say, let's round things up. Carrie, come on in. Kova.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to start real quick, because one thing that I got out of it, when Tom Bonier said, when we talk to Tom Bonier and we hear it directly from Tom and Rachel, we hear this, it's not being filtered through the media. And I think we talked about the media's need to make this all about the standard polling, which we all know is manipulated. And it's just so amazing to hear directly from them and to give us, we are intelligent people. We can understand this. And it is so great to hear it directly from them. And then I think I'm so encouraged by the messaging about Post Dobbs America. I think we're on that, lady. I think we're on it. So that's my takeaway.
Susan or Fennell, what do you, come on.
So I'm going to say just what I sort of my theme for today, which is pivot, 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 because you have to. And all of you who have been so effective in all the other activities and actions, you got to stay in it for the, as they say, till the fat lady sings, which I'm not sure you're allowed to say anymore, but that's the expression we used to use. And that takes vote curing goes. Yesterday, I was trained in vote curing by Vote Pro Pros. And one of the things I learned is every state has a different final day that you can cure your vote in every state. And it happened to be, they were focused on Nevada, and apparently you have till November 12th there. So there's a lot of work all of us activists can be doing from now through the election until we know for sure who actually sits in the Oval Office in January.
Yes. Thank you, Fennell. And
so here's where
wrap up, Fennell.
Yeah. So here's my quick Here's my quick wrap up. So listening to Rachel specifically in terms of the seriousness of this election, because I think it's really important. We bring the joy, but we also have to talk about the seriousness of what's at hand. And so when I think about that, listening to Rachel and Tom, and for the phone bank that we believe can make a difference, I'm just going to ask those who have not signed up for our phone bank today, are you fighting as hard as you can fight? Are you fighting as hard as you can fight? And so this is the one thing that you can do that can come together with us and fight as hard as you can. So sign up for our phone bank and fight as hard as you can.
Yeah, fight it. And I love it because together we're stronger. When there's more of us in a phone bank, it goes faster. We can just go through those calls, and it'll be cool to grow. I think Gloria Witt in CD5, Leslie Met in CD1. We have Missy Cotter, Smazel in CD, 2. We have Karen Baker at CD9. We have Jennifer McClellan in CD4. We have a lot of women on the ballot in Virginia. Let's not forget that. And then also Kamala Harris and Walz and Senator Kaine here. But nationally, this is a fight for our democracy. So we're going to have a lot of fun in the after chat. I see Federico, your hands up. Do we have a count for the phone bank, Robbin, that we can dance out to?
We're so close. We're so close to our total. Can we get a few more?
Federico, did you sign up?
I want to see you be brave, ladies. There's nothing more important than a person to person. So in the value of turning out, affecting the margin, in-person field is the most powerful, followed by telephone person. Okay. Phone banking. I love postcarding, but it's actually on the smaller end of the effect size scale because nothing makes more of a difference than face to face. Okay.
Yeah.
It's called the margin of effort. It's not the margin of error. It's the margin of effort.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, we can have a talk all day about that because what we noticed too, Rachel, people are not opening their doors as much and answering the phone. So we're thinking, so we go out where people are now.
All right, Rachel, you got 2 more people.
Woo, Rachel.
All right. Who else is?
All right. I want to thank, first of all, everybody here. This is a big weekend all across the country. I know everybody's going to hit doors and doing everything they can. Thank Rachel Bitecofer. Thank you so much. And you're going to stay with us. Tom
I will stay. I definitely stay. And those 2 that volunteered on my pitch, hopefully they stay and they can ask a question or something.
Yeah, I love it. And Tom Bonier, the CEO of Terra Group and also senior advisor to Target Smart. And next week, we're going to have our November 1st, kind of that All Souls Day will be after. We're going to be having a big kind of rally. Jerry Conley is going to be here. We're trying to get some other special guests, but we're going to have a great show next week. So we want to make sure you join us and have fun. A lot of Halloween stuff coming up. Kamala Harris is coming to DC October 29th. We're all going.
We're going.
Yeah, we're going because Women's March kind of activity, abortions on the ballot. Let's go strong.
I wish I could be there. I'd go too.
I know you would. We would put you on.
We'll pay for your ticket. Come on.
I'm coming out the week after I just can't.
Well, we're going to make sure that event, everybody across the world sees it. So
Yeah, we want to see a big, big, big crowd. Yes.
I think this is where I feel like it's coming full circle, like Susan Wagner said. So join us, follow us on social media, folks. Let's get to the other side of this, and we're ready for questions.